welcome. There's a koan in the Mumonkan, the Greatless Barrier. I was in a conversation with some people about it yesterday. I thought it would be good to read. We have talked about it once before. It's case 35, Wutsu, which is the true Chien. The koan itself is very short, but there's a long folk story that goes with it, so I'll read out the folk story as well. So it goes like this. Wutsu asked a monk, "The woman Chien and her spirit separated. Which is the true Chien?" So the woman Chien and her spirit separated. Which is the true Chien? And there's a verse. The moon and the clouds are the same. Mountains and valleys are different. All are blessed, all are blessed. Is this one? Is this two? So the story is, it's an old Chinese folk story, and it's very unusual. It's a couple of pages, so I'll read it out. There lived in Hanyang a father named Qian, whose child daughter, Qian, was of peerless beauty. He also had a nephew called Wang Chao, a very handsome boy. The children played together and were fond of each other. Once the father jestingly said to his nephew, "Someday I will marry you to my little daughter." Both the children remembered these words, and they believed themselves thus betrothed. When Qian grew up, a man of rank asked for her in marriage, and her father decided to comply with the demand. Qian was greatly troubled by this decision. As for Chao, he was so much angered and grieved that he resolved to leave home and go to another province. The next day, he got a boat ready for his journey, and after sunset, without bidding farewell to anyone, he proceeded up the river. But in the middle of the night, he was startled by a voice calling to him, "Wait, it is I." And he saw a girl running along the bank toward the boat. It was Qian. Chao was unspeakably delighted. She sprang into the boat, and the lovers found their way safely to the province of Chu. In the province of Chu, they lived happily for 6 years, and they had 2 children. But Qian could not forget her parents and often longed to see them again. At last she said to her husband, "Because in former times I could not bear to break the promise made to you, I ran away with you and forsook my parents. Although knowing that I owed them all possible duty and affection, would it not now be well to try and obtain their forgiveness?" "Do not grieve yourself about that," said Chao. "We shall go to see them." He ordered a boat to be prepared, and a few days later he returned with his wife to Hanyang. According to customs in such cases, the husband first went to the house of Qian the father, leaving Qian alone in the boat. Qian welcomed his nephew with every sign of joy and said, "How much I have longed to see you. I was often afraid that something had happened to you." Chao answered respectfully, "I am distressed by the undeserved kindness of your words. It is to beg your forgiveness that I have come." But Qian did not seem to understand. He asked, "To what matter do you refer?" "I feared," said Chao, "that you were angry with me for having run away with Qian. I took her with me to the province of Chu." "What Chien was that?" asked Kien the father. "Your daughter, Chien," answered Chow, beginning to suspect his father-in-law of some malevolent design. "What are you talking about?" cried Kien the father, with every appearance of astonishment. "My daughter Chien has been sick in bed all these years, ever since the time you went away." "Your daughter Chien," returned Chow, becoming angry, "has not been sick. She has been my wife for 6 years, and we have 2 children. And we have both returned to this place to seek your pardon. Therefore, please do not mock us." For a moment, the two looked at each other in silence. Then Kien, the father, arose and motioned to his nephew to follow, led the way to an inner room where a sick girl was lying. And Chow, to his utter amazement, saw the face of Chien, beautiful but strangely thin and pale. "She cannot speak," explained the old man, "but she can understand." And Kien said to her, laughingly, "Chow tells me that you ran away with him and that you gave him 2 children." The sick girl looked at Chow and smiled, but remained silent. "Now come with me to the river," said the bewildered visitor to his father-in-law, "for I can assure you, in spite of what I have seen in this house, that your daughter Chien is at this moment in my boat." They went to the river, and there indeed was the young wife waiting. And seeing her father, she bowed down before him and besought his pardon. The father said to her, "If you really be my daughter, I have nothing but love for you. Yet though you seem to be my daughter, there is something which I cannot understand. Come with us to the house." So the 3 proceeded toward the house. As they neared it, they saw that the sick girl, who had not before left her bed for years, was coming to meet them, smiling as if much delighted, and the 2 Chiens approached each other. But then, nobody could ever tell how, they suddenly melted into each other and became one body, one person, one Chien, even more beautiful than before, and showing no sign of sickness or sorrow. The father said to Chow, "Ever since the day of your going, my daughter was silent and most of the time like a person who had taken too much wine. Now I know that her spirit was absent." Chien herself said, "Really, I never knew that I was at home. I saw Chow going away in silent anger, and the same night I dreamt that I ran after his boat. And now I cannot tell which was really I, the one that went away in the boat, or the I that stayed at home." That's the story. It's a very strange and interesting story. And there's lots of different commentaries about this story. But I think what is most powerful for me is this sense of Chien feeling separated, Chien feeling split between 2 worlds, the world of obedience to her parents, and the world of wanting to do what she was inspired to do with her life. And so I've been reflecting on the ways in which we can feel split within ourselves. We aren't ever actually split. We're always here, right now, totally intimate with everything. But it doesn't mean that we don't feel sometimes torn and split and separate. We often do feel that in various ways. And I was thinking of the various ways in which we have this experience of feeling split, or not fully present somewhere. And an example that comes to mind is when we have a plan and we're heading out to do that thing, and then circumstance changes it for us and we can't do that thing. And in that moment, sometimes there's a little confusion in that moment when we're having to adjust to this unexpected reality that's just arrived. We can feel split. Part of us still wants to proceed in that particular way, but reality has changed the circumstance, so we can't proceed in that particular way. But we haven't quite yet accepted the change. And so just for a period of time, sometimes for people who've been practicing for a long time, it only might be a few seconds. Might just take a few seconds to go, oh, okay, I was about to do that and now I can't do that. It might just take us a few seconds to adjust. But sometimes people resist reality for quite long periods of time. Might be hours of being very frustrated that things aren't going the way they want. It might be days, could be years. When we fight with reality, it's very unpleasant because we're not letting ourselves just be with the situation. It's okay for us to want it to be different, but before we can act to bring about the change, the difference, it's very important to see the present reality for what it is. What it is, how it is. And from that place of being fully with it, fully accepting of the fact of it, then we can take some action. Which might mean to sort of pivot and do something different, or it might mean to try and alter the situation back to the way it was, maybe, to kind of arrange it so that we can continue. So we can feel very split when those things happen, a kind of disappointment or frustration. It's us sort of against reality rather than us with it, rather than us part of it. It can be us against it or us in resistance to it. And a little similar to that is when we have expectations that something's going to happen a certain way and our expectation is disappointed. We can often have expectations in our mind, and then when we get somewhere or meet that person, it's not what we expect. And I think another way that we can feel a sort of split from our life is when we are distracted by our thoughts, and so we're not engaging with what's in front of us, not engaging with everyday life in front of us. Instead, we're caught in our thoughts, and then we're kind of moving back and forth between what's going on in the present moment, in the present place, and what we're thinking about. And we're kind of getting distracted by our own thoughts, trying to pay attention. I think people have that difficulty sometimes. I can remember at school or studying it, sometimes when you need to pay attention because you have to learn this thing because you've got an exam coming up or something, but you're thinking about something else. And it's kind of hard. And the way to get unsplit in those situations is simply to recognise what's going on, to notice I am having great trouble concentrating because I have this other thing that I keep thinking about. And just doing that begins to help us really inhabit the reality that we're in, that includes the thoughts that we're having about something else. Maybe another way that we can feel separate is having the idea that we're separate. We have the thought that we're separate. We often have people have thoughts like, I'm not as good as everybody else, or I'm better than everybody else, or I'm different to everybody else, or different to them, or I'm not liked by them. Any number of ways in which we do that. We have probably countless different variations of ways in which we can generate the idea that we're separate. We're not separate, but we can have the thought and the feeling that we're separate. And then we feel separate and we act in ways as if we are separate. And of course the great tragedy in that is that we can feel that others are very different to us. And then we can act in ways that are harmful to them. Or we can feel that we're very different to somebody else and act in ways that are harmful to ourselves. The wisdom teachings talk about the way things are, and that it is possible to experience, without confusing thoughts, to experience the suchness of things, to experience just the way things are, without thoughts getting in the way, or having thoughts being as part of just the way things are, but not being a problem. And we have language to describe the way the world is, and the way to be not feel separate from the way the world is. But this is still just language that we use, but it is useful language. We have the teachings on the emptiness teachings that remind us that nothing is as substantial as it appears. That things appear and they look substantial, and in a certain practical way they are substantial, but they're also insubstantial. Things appear reliable on an everyday time scale, they are reliable, but in the bigger picture they're not reliable. And the emptiness teachings, in fact, kind of incorporates all the other teachings, like impermanence and no self, and actually Buddha nature as well. Because when we understand that everything is completely interpenetrating, then we're speaking about the whole of existence is indivisible in the ultimate sense. And then there's really no way to say there's something good or bad about it. It just totally is. It's just got an isness about it. And that sort of isness is another way, we call that Buddha nature sometimes, or true nature, or big mind. So I just want to read a little bit Suzuki Roshi says about this. There's a particular line that I like. I'll go over that again. He says, in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the most important point, of course, is the idea of emptiness. Before we understand the idea of emptiness, everything seems to exist substantially. But after we realize the emptiness of things, everything becomes real, not substantial. When we realize that everything we see is part of emptiness, we can have no attachment to any existence. We realize that everything is just a tentative form and colour. Thus we realize the true meaning of each tentative existence. When we first hear that everything is a tentative existence, most of us are disappointed. But this disappointment comes from a wrong view of man and nature. It is because our way of observing things is deeply rooted in our self-centered ideas that we are disappointed when we find everything has only a tentative existence. But when we actually realize this truth, we will have no suffering. And I particularly like the way he says, after we realize the emptiness of things, everything becomes real, not substantial. Everything becomes real. Everything becomes vibrant. We can see everything with this deep love and connectedness to it. And it doesn't mean that it's pleasant. Everything being real and vibrant doesn't mean everything is pleasant. Some things are very unpleasant at times. And there are people always around the world in terrible suffering terribly. And when we understand the teachings, we can feel that we can feel the realness of it. It's not abstract, it's not theoretical, it's not separate from us. We can have a heartfelt feeling of pain and anguish for the suffering in the world. We don't feel separate from it. We don't feel foreign. It doesn't feel strange and peculiar. We can feel an empathic kind of intimacy with everything. And in that frame, everything is real. So it feels like Chien, when she was thinking, when she'd been married and had children and was missing her parents, at that point when she said to her husband, I think we should go back. I think this is this beautiful moment that she was able to sort of become really whole, become whole and want to come back and kind of be her full self, which included the love of her parents. She wanted to come back to that. And sort of in the story, the two Chiens come together and merge, as if she becomes fully herself. And so we can do that. We can become fully ourselves. We have to love ourselves. We have to listen to our thoughts and be curious and interested in them. Listen to our feelings, be curious and interested in them. Be curious and interested in the thoughts and feelings of others and of everything. Notice the sounds. And then we can become whole, not separated. We're never separated, but we can feel the wholeness that we actually are. We can totally feel it. And it gives us energy, gives us joy. So the verse that goes with this koan, the moon and the clouds are the same. Mountains and valleys are different. All are blessed, all are blessed. Is this one? Is this two? So in our teachings, we talk a lot about the two truths of form and emptiness. And there's not actually two truths, it's just a way to make sense of reality, that reality can't really be pinned down with a singular fact. No singular fact that you can pin it down with. There's different ways of seeing reality, always different ways. And we describe that as the two truths, the conventional way and the ultimate way. So here the moon and the clouds are the same. The moon is often an image for an awakened mind, an awake mind. And clouds is often an image for the thoughts that get in the way of the moon, the thoughts that go across the moon, the thoughts that cause us to not see our true beautifulness, to not see the goodness in everything and everyone. But here it's saying the moon and the clouds are the same. From the ultimate perspective, they are the same because everything is completely interconnected with everything else. You can't have two things like an awakened mind and a deluded mind as totally separate things. An awakened mind actually can only become awakened through having seen the delusions. And there'd be no such thing as a deluded mind if there wasn't an alternative to delusion being an awakened mind. So we can also, when we do Zazen, try and remind ourselves not to get caught in good and bad Zazen. Good and bad Zazen's all the same. Just wonderful to be sitting Zazen. But then we've got mountains and valleys are different. So important for us to recognize difference. Everything is the same, everything is different at the same time. Very important. If we can function with this knowing, everything is the same and everything is different, then we make good choices, we're skillful, because sometimes we respond to the sameness and sometimes we respond to the difference according to conditions, whatever's more suitable. And then all are blessed, all are blessed. I think this is where the equanimity comes from, and the joy. If we have equanimity and joy, then we can truly say all are blessed, all are blessed. Is this one? Is this two? Because we can never pin reality down. It's just in a constant flux, and it can't be known, it can't be known. So we say, is this one? Is this two? As close as we can get. All right. Would anyone like to ask a question, make a comment, share a thought? Fiona?
Thanks, Neti. That's such a beautiful story. Yeah, really beautiful images. Yeah, and yeah, I'm so distracted at the moment. So perfect for me, just the moment. Yeah, and what I'm thinking is like, yeah, the living the life, the mother lives a life. It's yeah, she follows her, I guess, her spirit, her will, her wishes, and that yeah, but she still longs for that, the law of the parents and the forgiveness. So yeah, just going between, I guess, that being at ease with life, but also looking for that. And it might relate to my aspirations in practice, to want to have some zeal in my practice and discipline. I want to go back to my parents. Mm-hmm.
I had the thought about that image that there was the active side of her. She wanted to go out and do her life, and then the sort of quiet side of her, just to be with her parents, to be with her home, to be at the base, kind of thing. And all of us can kind of have activity and stillness There's a way for activity and stillness to unify, as we often do with the mudra, that the right hand is activity and the left hand is stillness, and we bring the two together. In our zazen, activity and stillness unify. And so the story is a little bit like that. The still Chen and the active Chen come together. And you could also think of the Chen that stayed at home as sort of more the sort of Confucian idea of obedience. And then the Chen that goes away is the kind of creative, free spirit. And how do we kind of live a life where we respect both those aspects? Like we do in the Zendo, we have the forms, and they're very particular, and we do them, but that doesn't stop us also still being our own individual people. Even in the Zendo, we find our own, we can't help it. We're just slightly ourselves, but we're also following the forms. Like obeying road rules is a good idea. People have their individual cars, but they still obey the traffic lights. There's all these different pairings that seem like opposites but actually complement each other really well in the end. Okay. All right. Well, we can finish with our chant and our bows.